YouTube, what is going on? It's your boy Buddha back in the building for another Last Cloudia unit build and showcase video. One that I have been super lazy making because your boy has been spending way too much time over on Twitch playing Elden Ring. My god, is that game fun. And I've been ignoring my duties as a Last Cloudia content creator, but today I'm hiking the pants up and showcasing our boy Gorm CRYSTALIA. Very late video in the making because I was late to the party in acquiring this guy myself, building him up, but we now finally have him at 5-star level 110, 120 board, awakening 4, and enough souls to give the man proper respect and unlock Gorm's award. Armor equipped physical damage taken -1%. We will definitely take it, spend the 200 souls, and with that, we are ready to showcase our prince right here. Prince L'Amour, very in love, a romantic, just like your boy Buddha, capital S word. It's no question when you actually look at his story, his background. Our boy Gorm is what you consider a tank in Last Cloudia, a role that hasn't really been that prevalent. I think until much more recently. I talk a lot about how I'm a fan on how tanks have evolved, their role has evolved in Last Cloudia with certain bosses that have been introduced, different stages, and especially in Arena. So what we're going to do, we're going to highlight Gorm, what his role is, look through his kit, create a general tank build together, how I would build Gorm specifically, and just tanks in general, and then take him into some highlight showcases. Without further ado, let's check out the man's summary. You can see that he is a knight type, right? So he falls under the human category. If we then look at his stats right here, you can see he comes with some nice base HP, a huge base defense stat, which is part of the reason why he is such a good tank in himself. Very hard for any enemies to deal damage to him. Resistances, you can see 20 to fire, 20 to ice, 5 to earth. He's very, very weak to thunder and weak to dark, neutral to light. Ailment resistances, he's weak to poison, nil to blind, neutral to silence, curse, and stun, and resistant to illness. So not the craziest set of resistances, but not a huge deal at the end of the day. We have him at 92 SC. So that's the kind of build we're going to be rocking. Moving on to the abilities. Not a super big deal. Nothing to highlight here, but triple blade, medium area ice combo attack. Have at me, wide area ice combo attack centered on a unit. Centered on the unit and apply a physical damage taken -30% buff to unit. Gorm Extraordinaire, frontal medium area ice combo attack that launches enemies into the air. Slightly restore HP to all allies. And Le Grand Bal du Prince. Powerful ice combo attack to all enemies and restore HP and SCT 10 seconds for all allies. Some nice utility found in his move sets, so definitely use them when you have the chance, but not something that I'm particularly highlighting in this showcase. Looking at the traits, this is where it gets interesting. Protection de l'Amour, right? Battle start. Apply the defended buff to ally with lowest max HP, excluding unit to boost HP and defense. Now, don't get this confused. There is a bit of interchangeability with this battle start phrasing. It's the same thing that's going on with Sheeta. Sometimes when you see battle start, it means a 40-second buff. However, with this buff in particular, I do not believe it is a 40-second buff to a unit. This is persisting until either the unit is incapacitated or Gorm goes down. So don't get that confused. Here, battle start is just telling us when the actual buff is applying. Then that is described further. HP defense boost is 35% of units' HP and defense before battle start. Lost if incapacitated, of course. So the receiver of Gorm's buff here is determined by Gorm's actual HP and defense, taking 35% of Gorm's total amount and applying it to the buffed unit. Then we're looking at crystal armor. Nullify flinch from fire and ice magic. Very useful in arena. Physical damage taken -50%, but effect reduced 1% when attacked, and this recovers over time. So every physical hit that 50% is going to decrease by 1 per hit, per my understanding. Just making him very, very, very tanky to physical type attacks. Notice a lot of physical damage mitigation. Is the main damage mitigation type that we have in terms of traits and skills. It's not just overall damage mitigation. Pay attention to those kinds of wordings. So looking at this guy, he is a major tank himself and then provides a little more tanky support, defensive support to one ally, which you will want to tailor in your team builds if you're using this guy in PvE. Make sure that whoever you want to get the bigger buff, the defensive buff, typically your offensive unit, you want to artificially make sure that their HP is the lowest on battle start. And then we have the innate skills. Let's go ahead and read through them this way, right? Starting with stat ups, he gets HP up 3, defense up max, resolve up 3, resolve up 4. Guard, steel guard, vigilance, heal guard, and guard charge. Very, very important here. Pay attention as we'll get into building him shortly after the guard package. Royal armor reduces chance of receiving critical hits. PvE enemies can crit you. I've never found it to be a major thing to pay attention to, so I'd say the main use for having royal armor is in arena again. Defensive down evasion. Chance to nullify defense down debuffs inflicted by enemies. Active skills. So this doesn't work if in arena, if someone, has an ability like piercing that passively lowers your defense. This would be if some mage or some spellcaster tried to use drain, right? The actual spell that lowers defense, then Gorm has that chance to evade that altogether, but does not work for passive defense evasions. Keep that in mind. Night zone, more likely to be attacked. We want to pay attention to when we see those more likely to be attacked. Those are allure stacks, another very important part of tanks in general. Frontal physical attack damage plus 10%. Frontal physical damage taken minus 10%. Gorm does get some damage modifiers, but we don't really care about those. I'm just going to tell you now. Just the fact that it gives more damage mitigation, we do like that. And this is another physical damage mitigation, keep in mind. Human shield, damage from humans minus 20%. This is our first damage reduction overall that we're seeing, which is great. So any kind of humans, again, deal to minus 20% less damage. Again, screams arena. Auto brave, auto fort, which is a plus 20% to defense stat. Auto haste, just fine. Ice high drive, again, a physical damage mod, but Gorm is not shining in the physical damage department. Maglion shield, it comes with innately, which is great. Again, arena, we love it. Doppelhander, physical damage mod. Sword hide boost, physical damage mod. Armor boost and armor mega boost, giving us this defensive buff of 20% and 7% respectively, and then some damage mitigation from bosses. So that is very good in PvE content. Flanks, when armor is equipped, take killer slayer damage minus 20% and take critical damage minus 20%. Arena, we love it. Indomitable Spirit, one of the best survivability skills in the entire game. When we get this on an arc, that is going to be extremely high value. Currently, we've only seen it innately in certain characters. When lethal damage is taken, recover 50% HP. When surviving that, gain a skill damage plus 30%. It's mainly just about taking that lethal damage and recovering from it that makes it so good on Gorm here. And then his uniques. Medicine de l'Amour. When an ally with the defended buff has 50% or HP or less, use 50 MP to very greatly recover that ally's HP. So now these skills are playing off of that defended buff that Gorm gives out in his trait. Hide behind me. Physical damage taken minus 15% for ally with the defended buff, giving that ally extra physical damage mitigation. We love it. Love Reboot. When a unit or ally with defended buff is revived, reapply the HP and defensive buff from the Protection de l'Amour trait. So basically, if you can just keep Gorm alive, keep rezzing whichever unit has that buff, you're going to have that throughout the entire battle. And Gold Soul. When close to death, very greatly recover HP and boost defense plus 100%. Become more likely to be targeted by enemies once per wave. So when he gets to that 30% mark, he will recover that HP, get that defensive boost of 100%. Keep this in mind because We're going to be looking at other skills that recover your health when you drop below a certain percentage, and they do not stack. Keep that in mind. He does have one of these skills built in innately, and that covers his innate skill board. Very, very tanky. As we can see, HP ups, defense up, resolve ups. He has a lot of the guard package innately. He's got some just random stat ups, auto fort we like to see. Maglion shield, damage mitigation, armor boost, more defensive ups, indomitable spirit. He's got some sustain, and then his uniques that kind of play off of his defensive buff that he gives allies. So, with that being covered, what does CRYSTALIA Gorm need? Well, your boy has made a little general chart of what we want to think about when building our tanks, and really this applies to Gorm and Ruto currently. Until we get a tank in the near future, those are the only two meta tanks that perform to the level that you'd expect in the game's current climate. So, as we can see, we have a list of general idea, what skills to look for, what we want to add on top of Gorm. He's already coming with everything we can see above, so we just kind of want to build on top of that. And then I want you to pay attention to secondary utility. So this is where tanks can become, they become a bit malleable in what you want them to do. We know with Ruto, I don't mean to take the spotlight away from Gorm, but it's relevant here. With Ruto, he has that secondary utility built in him, where he also acts as a healer as well as being a tank. Gorm, we see, in terms of secondary utility, all he's doing is providing another ally with that defensive and HP boost. So he can kind of become something that you're maybe lacking in your team comp. Let's say you didn't start with the Spirit Made Interior. You can drop skills on him to make him a better healer. Or if you want to add some extra debuffing to the enemies, you can start slapping some weaks, some elemental debuff circles, different stat decreases like Blazer, Drain, Lostoma, Nemesis you can give to him. My point is, after we really are happy with emphasizing the main things you can see up there, things like the guard package, allure stacks, making sure his self-sustain is really solid, then you kind of want to keep in mind that secondary utility, whether it's building off of what they can give, right? Ruto with his healing, Gorm with his defensive buffing, or if you want to make it just something extra, an extra layer to the team that you don't quite have on another support type unit. So we'll come back to different magic spells towards the end. I want to make sure those first three things that we see up there are really covered, as I said. And right out of the gate, I usually mention coming back to stat ups, which still is kind of the case here. But HP plus 2, which is a skill you get off of the Tower of Trials LR Ark, getting to level or floor 80 and beating it for the first time, you will get that arc and you can get access to this skill, which is, I would say, mandatory. It's not mandatory, but in my builds, just slap it on any type of defensive support unit that you have. HP plus 1,000 is just an incredible return for the cost of 4 SC. So I usually slap that on my units, especially my tanks and my healers. HP up max, we'll wait to come back to that, see how much SC we have left over. But now we are going to skip over the MP ups, the attack ups, defense ups. If you wanted, you could start throwing defense ups on him just because he is a tank. He loves that defense. But there are other skills and utility I want to add on to Gorm that I think just are a better use of our SC versus these stat ups. Scrolling down, we get to the guard package. So we notice that he came with a lot of the guard package innately, which is great. So I'm just going to go ahead and add the rest of it to him. 12 SC right there to finish off everything. Guard, right, that's just going to give him the ability to activate guard. Then Steel Guard increases the amount that we are taking when guard is active. I believe guard is normally a minus 25% to damage reduction. Steel Guard makes it a minus 50%. So these are always hand in hand, as well as vigilance, which ups the chance of guard actually happening. This is just a core. You need these 3 if you're thinking about running a guard package. Spell Guard, giving us the chance to guard attacks when magic is going off. Heal Guard, when guard is actually happening, you are gaining HP, which is great. It usually offsets the amount of damage you're taking while in guard, so you're actually getting that passive regen with Heal Guard. Magic Guard is going to recover MP, which is going to be important because we're going to utilize the MP pool later in the build with spells and different damage mitigation that relies off of MP, so having Magic Guard, I would say, is very important to use. Guard Charge is going to be nice, gives us SCT while guarding, so you can take advantage of those utility skills, since that's the main focus, or that's the main purpose of Gorm's abilities, in my opinion. Not so much getting any damage off, but getting that 30% damage mitigation to Gorm, while also having the SCT, or I'm sorry, the HP recovery on his S3 for the team. And Grand Guard, of course, just makes guard less likely to break. Enemies do have a chance to break guard, so Grand Guard here just takes that percentage down a notch. Finished with the guard package there. Here is another set of skills I want to call out. The shield skills, I don't have a lot taught to him. I don't have any. Oh, here we go. We have Beast Shield taught to Gorm here. Just like we save SC for the appropriate slayers to inflict more offensive damage to specific enemy types, the shields, I think, should be considered when you are running a tank or even any other kind of support unit, because it is quite a nice damage reduction, minus 10%. Right, we're looking for modification, right? Percentage modifiers in damage reduction versus offensive power. Right, that's the only difference in our ideology when building tanks and adding defense to a unit. But since this is very tailored to a specific type, this is something we'll definitely come back to at the end of builds when we're thinking about what kind of content we're taking our tank into. Here's something I want to call out, something I'll give a little shout out to That Zero Plays. I learned a lot from him really early on. He called out a lot of little strategies that you just wouldn't really think about unless you have a real high IQ or you have been taught before. Spears are a great weapon choice for your tanks, because if we scroll all the way down, I'm just going to show it here. Spear high boost. When a spear is equipped, physical attack damage 15%, but also physical damage taken minus 15%. So this is one of the only, I think the only weapon boost that gives any type of damage mitigation, specifically physical damage mitigation, but that's typically the most common type of damage you need to look out for. So very useful if the unit can't equip spears innately to give them that spear equip. I don't actually know if Gorm can without the skill spear equip. If we go ahead and look at his equip, he can. So you don't need to use the skill spear equip for Gorm since he can equip them naturally, which is even better, but something I wanted to call out if you want to run them on a tank or use a tank build on someone who can't innately wield spears. So just keep that in mind right there. We get into like ailment resistances here, and I think this will be important if you have certain kinds of things that you're tailoring your tank to do, right? If we want to be casting spells with Gorm, it may be in our best interest to maybe give stun resist, silence resist if we have revives on our tank, which I probably will do here. It's important that the tank is never going down or getting stunned out of use, because they're going to be responsible for bringing back your offense, right, with revives or with cure-alls or with heals if you want to go that route. So something you should keep in mind, right, stun resist, silence resist may be important, stun nil, silence nil, I don't have taught to him. We're going to skip over this, however, I do want to bring it to attention that these can be very useful on your supports, as I mentioned in the Sarah video, if you haven't watched that build as well. A lot of the tank slash support slash healing ideology when you're building the units kind of correlates, it mingles together. So a lot of transferable advice in those regards. As we can see, Gorm does not have protection or barrier built into his kit, which is pretty important since protection is a minus 20% to physical damage, and I believe barrier is minus 20% to magic damage. We're going to use the fast abilities here to save that SC, and because I'm going to be taking them into content that I don't think will be taking longer than 40 seconds for us to clear. Obviously, auto protection would probably be a good spend. Barrier isn't so much of a concern to me just because I can't recall many fights that are super prevalent in dealing a ton of magic damage that you need to be worried about. But if you come across one, and I'm just not thinking of an obvious one, right, barrier is going to be useful. So we're going to slap on the fast buff right there for him in both of those damage mitigations. Comes with auto haste, so we can skip over that. Then we're looking at these armor abilities and these fast wall abilities. I think are, again, kind of the same thought process as the shields, right? When we're thinking about the actual content we're taking on, if we're going into a specific boss fight, or if we're not, we should keep that in mind and maybe use these armors accordingly and these walls accordingly. The fast walls, they're going to be your 40-second element-specific damage mitigation, and the armors are a persistent element damage mitigation. Same difference between your fast and your auto buffs. Then we get to these abilities: Fury, Patience, Tranquility, all of these increasing certain stats when close to death. I don't think it's a bad idea, especially for that 2 SC, to throw on the increased defense and increase MND when close to death, just giving that extra sustain, that extra defensive capability. When you're getting lower in health, you're adding more layers of protection to hopefully have your healer recover the tank, or if the tank is your pseudo healer, allow him to recover himself. Again, I'll bring up that Tranquility is very nice because you generally want to have better heals when you are at lower health, and increasing the MND, if Gorm is to do the healing, will increase those amounts of heals, since that's the stat that healings scale off of. So Awaken here, this is what I wanted to bring up in regards to the skill, the unique buff that Gorm recovers HP and gains that plus 100% defensive buff when at low HP. If you equip Awaken here, they will both activate at the same time, and the defensive buff from Awaken does not stack on top of the unique defensive buff, which is plus 100%, a lot higher than the defense buff here, which is plus 50%. So if you want to use Awaken, what will you be getting from it? For 9 SC, you'd be getting 50% strength, 50% MND, and movement speed off of this skill. The argument can be made that the MND boost can be worth it. However, I just don't see the return here. If you're going to be spending 9 SC, I think this is something you come back to, especially since you got to remember, these recover at low HP skills don't stack, right? They all happen at the same time. So then you got to figure out which buffs you're getting from which skills. And I think the recovering HP and the defensive buff that he gets from his unique skill make Awaken a lot less of a return for 9 SC. So just something to keep in mind. Wanted to call it out. Then we've got these at max HP skills, Pride, Moonlight. I'm not going to give him because I'm not trying to add on to Gorm's offensive stats at all. That's a real waste in my opinion. Flying Shadow, I don't think he really needs movement speed like that. However, Dusk, big skill here, especially since we have the skill above Magic Guard, giving us that MP regeneration when guarding. Even if you are using spells with Gorm and using other skills that use MP for damage mitigation, as we'll see later on, I think Dusk is still a good skill to run on him because Magic Guard gives a bit better MP sustain than we're typically used to with other types of unit kits. So I think Dusk is absolutely a great skill to use on your tanks, even if you're going to be utilizing their MP in other ways. Skipping over all of the damage modifiers because we're not interested there. The poses, not interested because Gorm's not going to be getting the kills, so that's kind of a waste for me. Ale of Honor, not a bad snag if you're doing wave by wave content just to get that passive MP regen to, you know, hit that full MP mark in order to activate Dusk, just to give that more reliable MP sustain, but we're going to skip over it for now. High level magic chant. Now I am going to be equipping Gorm with some casting abilities, so this is going to be pretty important. Casting speed, since that's going to be the secondary utility we're going to give Gorm here. Making sure he can cast quickly is a bit higher on my priority list with this build. And then we get to the first actual like allure stack that we can add on to Gorm. Very important, very important. I'd say guard package and allure stacks are the two most important things you can make sure your tank has to immediately make them useful in the role that they fulfill. So we're absolutely going to start or stack that. Girls Party. Now this was the last V-Day, Valentine's Day LR arc that you could grind up for free. Sad for anyone who started after Valentine's Day, but we know this skill will return, that arc will return next year, and is huge for your male tanks. Your allure stacks, right? That's what draws the enemy AI attention to a specific unit. Think of it as a stackable by 1. I don't think the data mines have confirmed that any skills give like a +2 to your stack. It's always a +1 when you see more likely to be targeted. Increased rate of attracting, that's a +1 to your allure stacks. So with allure and girls party, we are now at +2. I don't know the exact percentage that it technically adds the more allure stacks you have. Just know that when you have a tank and you want to use a tank, you'll want them to have as many allure stacks as possible. So getting this girls party for male tanks, because as we can see it differs depending on the gender of the unit, is very important to note and pay attention to it when you are utilizing your tanks. Okay, physical damage healing and physical damage healing 2. On paper, I think they sound a lot better than they actually are, because then we also have magical damage healing 1 and 2. I personally would never recommend using these skills unless you literally have nothing but extra SC to throw on, because while the percentages sound better, you know, when taking physical damage, chance to recover 25% of the damage's HP, and then physical damage 1. Chance to recover 10%. So if you stack both of them, 35% HP back as damage. You got to remember, this is a chance to recover this. And to determine the real percentage of damage mitigation that's occurring, you have to multiply the two percentages together. And I believe it's a 20% chance to activate each one of these. So in actuality, to not confuse you with the math, both of these give you about a 7% damage mitigation. So that's 7% physical damage mitigation for 8 SC. Not a great return, guys. Not a great return. And then the same with the magic damage healings. So you'd be spending 16 SC for only 7% damage mitigation in both areas if you have all 4 of those skills equipped. So I don't personally recommend this build or using these skills, like I said, unless you have nothing else, or if you just have a ton of extra SC to use at the end of your build. So we're skipping over that definitely. And then here we can see, right, they want you to wield swords with Gorm. They gave him Doppelhander, they gave him Sword High Boost. But since these are damage modifiers, I'm not interested in them at all. And I personally want to give him more physical damage mitigation, 20% to be exact, with spear boosts, since that is going to be the weapon of choice I'm going to be using with Gorm here. Now, while I am paying attention to Gorm's abilities in their utility use, personally, I'm not interested in spending any SC on SCT regen or sustain, since it's not a main focus of the role I want Gorm to play. Now, you have gimmicks here and there like with Ruto, where his S2 is extremely important since it allows him to draw the attraction of enemies forcefully. That scales off the M and D stat. So in that case, right, skill charge 2, giving Ruto more ability to use his S2 is a big key part to his kit and his gimmick. However, for Gorm, it's not really like that. His abilities are just kind of extra boosts on top. They're not really essential in his core gameplay. So I'm not really concerned with stocks or charges. So we're skipping over SCT altogether. I'm just focused on the things you can really see above me. And we get to Celestial Mass. This is the skill that I was bringing up. Utilizes MP for more physical damage mitigation. This skill, you can argue, can't be turned on or off. I personally don't think you need it. I think Gorm already has a ton of damage mitigation built in, and I'd rather keep his MP at max more reliably by having this off in order to get the Dusk effect than actually use this skill. Especially since it's only physical damage, right? If it doesn't protect against boss specials, it doesn't protect against magic attacks, strong magic attacks in PvE. So for a PvE build, I'm actually not super enamored with Celestial Mass. I'd rather have less MP usage to take advantage of Dusk more often than having this one type of damage mitigation utilizing a ton of MP. So we're going to skip over Celestial Mass, but still a good skill to throw on tanks. Absolutely. I'm not trying to undermine it, but just keep in mind it's only physical damage, and it could be arguable that you're getting a better defensive return just by having Dusk active rather than Celestial Mass. Rapid recovery and concentration are actually considerable here, just because if Gorm does get caught with some status ailments or gets fainted if you're not running Spirit Maid Interior, you want to get out of those real quick. So I don't think it's a bad idea if you want to throw these on, but I think I'd come back to these after I hammer out everything, right? Go through all of my list of taught skills to emphasize the things above, and then if we have extra SC, I'll come back and consider these. And as I say that, we approach the end of my current list. Christmas Carol, I love. This is a seasonal LR, so not many are going to have this, but because I explain the ideology in these builds, I'm not afraid to use limited skills that I personally have, because you should be able to just kind of think about, oh, I don't have this skill, but let me think about other skills that apply to emphasizing the above build basics. You can interchange things there, and I try to, give you some skills, some alternatives, some alternative thinking when you're building. But since we have this, and your boy did pull it, we're definitely going to be using it because, as you can see at the battle start, apply a damage taken minus 10% buff to unit for 100 seconds. So the wording, damage overall. There's no physical damage. It doesn't say magical damage. It's all damage is mitigated for 5 SC, even though it does count down slowly over 100 seconds. Just starting out with overall damage mitigation, I'm a personal fan of. We're definitely equipping that to Gorm here. Automail equipped another collab skill from the Full Metal Alchemist. Add machine type to the unit, but then you get physical attack damage plus 10%, but more importantly, physical damage taken minus 10%. Definitely a skill I would also consider putting on Gorm. Not going to here because now that I've got kind of my main skills, my main passive skills on Gorm to emphasize what we're seeing above. Oh, future Buddha here while I'm editing. Looking through the build that we were just doing on Gorm, I totally forgot to talk about or mention this skill right here, Stone World, because I didn't have it taught to him at the time. But it's definitely a collab skill. For those of you who weren't around during the Dr. Stone, I do apologize, but many players may have this, may be returning from when they played back then, so they should know to utilize Stone World if able. Because it gives this 20% to defense, gives stone type to the unit, so you do need to keep that in mind. Whenever you're adding different typings to units, you want to be worried about different slayers, mainly in arena, and unit cannot be affected by ignored defense effects. So just like we mentioned, defense down evasion helps Gorm evade actual casted defensive down debuffs. This is the only known skill that cuts all kinds of defensive down debuffs, including your passives like piercing, armor piercer, we just recently saw on Levi. So for arena specifically, I'm not too enamored with this skill in PvE content. For 11 SC, it's pretty high, but for arena specifically, Stoneworld can be an incredibly essential skill for tanking a lot of units using piercing, armor piercer, things like that. Not only for the extra defense, but because of that defense down nullification completely. So wanted to shout this out because maybe we'll get a skill in the future that allows for this kind of ignore defense effect. And you definitely want to be on the lookout for that when you're considering your tanks and how you utilize them. Now I want to think about that secondary utility, and with about 29 SC available to me, I want to make sure my secondary utility is taken care of before going back into more passives to add on. So with Gorm, what do I want to give this man? I think I'm going to go ahead and make Gorm a debuffer, an enemy debuffer, just further lowering the enemy's offensive stats so that Gorm takes less damage, the team takes less damage, in a form of debuffing that I don't have to worry about my other support inflicting, since Gorm can kind of take on the SC, take on that role, make him a little more active in his playstyle. So we're going to go ahead and give him Giga Blazer and Giga Lastoma. But again, remember that you have total control here about what specifically you might want your tank to do with their secondary utility. Right, we could teach them ice walls for specific element mitigation for the team, Anulamelth Giga Weak if we want to play off of ailments and or elemental resistance debuffing. I don't think I have any circles taught to him, but that he can easily be a circle debuffer as well. You can give him team buffing with protection, grand protection, magic barriers. Even if you wanted to make him a lightning gauge spell stunner, you can go that route, right? Secondary utility on a tank is very, very open to whatever you want to do, which makes it very, very useful. But now we can see that we are at 75 out of 92. If I'm forgetting something I wanted to mention, I'm sure I will remember it after I'm done filming. So we're just going to pretend we're ending at 75, covering all of the basics, and now we have freedom to just use 17 SC however we like. I'm going to start by throwing on HP up max, going up to 80, and then I think I'm just going to throw on a bunch of defense ups to Gorm, giving him that extra defense. And we'll go further down, and I think for the final 6 SC, I'll go ahead and give him rapid recovery, since we aren't using any specific status ailment resist skills. Rapid recovery will just hopefully help him come out of status ailments quicker if we do get hit with one of those. With 2 SC left to spend, I guess we'll go back up to the stat ups. And since we are trying to use some spells, I'll give him a bigger MP pool. If I had MP up 3 taught to him, I would use that skill, since it's also 2 SC for I think 12% MP, but since I have MP up 2 taught to him, we'll just go ahead and slap that on our boy. And there we go. We now have a general PvE Allure tank with the ability to debuff the enemy's offensive stats, just helping further increase damage mitigation to the team, and I'm liking it a lot. But we're not done with the build. That just covers skills. Same ideology that we see above when we're thinking about equips. As we know, weapon of choice that I'm going with are spears, since that is giving us that extra 20% physical damage mitigation. So what do we have available to us here? I'm looking for anything that helps us with our above mission, right, in our tank utility. Arcana Spear, I wish worked outside of Tower of Trial, because this is just a nasty extra ability when guarding minus 25% damage taken. So in Tower of Trials, if you're running a tank with a spear build, go ahead and use Arcana Spear. I think that's from the God Forge, so of course very end game, but these are the types of weapons you want to work your way up towards. Of course, any spear is fine if you're using the physical damage mitigation strategy, since you're automatically getting that upon equipping a spear. But I think I like Dragoon Spike here. While the trait itself isn't anything too crazy, it gives us SCT speed plus 10%, which is useful, like I said, giving us more stocks quicker to utilize that utility in his S2 and S3 is just fine. And more importantly, what I saw is it gives us this 200 to HP, HP being a very important stat for our tanks. It's a nice amount to add on top of Gorm, and some defense, right? So just a good spear to use in general for your tanks, I think. Looking at armor, there's really only one piece of armor that stands above the others when we're talking about tanks, and that is from the God Forge Shine Plate God Gold. Remember, all these skills and equipment pieces, if you're wondering how to get them, where they come from, you can find all that information in Lake's Gold Mine website, the best resource for Last Cloudia ever in existence. I always have the website link in the pinned comment below, so make sure to check that out if you're curious as to where to get these items. Will help you work your way towards that. I guess I have it on Lansvale currently, but we're gonna steal that real quick. Gives us a real nice stat boost, as we can see, some extra resistance to blind, but increases rate of attracting enemy attention, so gives us an extra allure stack. But physical damage taken minus 10%, another physical damage mitigation. Chance to nullify physical damage altogether. I'm pretty sure that chance is very, very low, but as you can see, just an incredible piece of armor for everything we're trying to achieve above. When thinking about accessories, again, anything that helps us accomplish the above build basics, and or just give us really nice stats in HP, defense, and MND if you're worried about heals or magic damage specifically. When you see these pieces of equipment that say chance to auto guard, this does not give more percentage to guarding. It doesn't stack your percentage up for your unit to actually guard. Guarding is like Slayers, where it's just binary. It's either on or off, and since Gorm has guard built into his innate skills, these chance to guard, chance to auto guard pieces of equipment literally do nothing. It's a wash of an effect. So technically, like if we wanted to use Geld Shield, we would just be getting effectively the 2% from it and the stats that we can see. But again, like if you want to run 400 HP extra, 45 extra defense, and 2% defense here, right? This isn't a bad beginner equipment to use at all if you were around for the Tensura or Slime collab that just occurred. I don't think any pieces of gear that have this type of effect, nullifying physical magic attack damage, a chance to do that, you know, that's just a solid piece of equipment to run. Radiant Soul Crystal, of course, is a great accessory to run on your tanks or supports. Gives that HP plus 10%, a little bit of extra SCT, recovery speed, and just some nice stats across the board, as well as 5 resistances to all elements. So I do like that accessory a lot. You get that from the Galanova fight. Kohaku Shield is really nice, especially for any kind of guarding build. Guard break is less likely to occur. I believe that does stack on top of Grand Guard. We're going to skip over it, though, just because I'm still looking through all of these. Bell of Warning, definitely should shout this out, because this is one of the only things in the game. I think it's Bell of Warning, and then it's actually an event-specific sword that do give an increased guard rate, as we can see how it reads when equipped with automatic guard equipment. Guard rate plus 5%. So this does increase guard rate by 5%, as it states. So usually I would just throw this on Gorm, especially for PvP in Arena, because you want guard happening as often as possible. And just for sticking with the basics, I think we'll go ahead. You can see I have it on Ruto right now. Go ahead and give it to Gorm as his first accessory. I didn't shout these out because I'm kind of still thinking about them, but right, Salmia's Freno Band and Yggdrasil Ring I think are pretty good accessories to throw on supports and or tanks or any kind of defensive builds, just because of their effects. Although you got to pay attention, like with Salmia, it's nice it gives 92 to defense and mind, but its effect at battle start autocast Fort Matisse speed We know Gorm already has Fort, so you'd only be getting Matisse and Speed, and then the 3 seconds of SCT to all skills. Not a bad choice, but definitely wouldn't be my first. Yggdrasil Ring, I know when it is Godforged, I don't have it there yet. It's the one I'm currently working on, but when it's Godforged, it has 600 HP, 30 MP, and then I think a lot higher defense in mine. I think somewhere in the 80s. So just for stat sticks alone, I think the Yggdrasil Ring would be a great option. Its effect becomes when revived, you auto cast, I think, Fort, Brave, Aura, and Matisse, something like that. I mean, we can actually go check, but that's what I think it does. However, the ideology with Gorm is that we don't want him dying, so the when revived effect doesn't really tempt me. It's more so for the stats alone that it gives. Rad Moonstone is always appropriate if you aren't using it. As you can see, I have it on Sarah. My healer is who I want to have most of my casting speed, so I'm going to leave it there, but like if we had Spirit Maiden Tyria and we didn't need to utilize Rad Moonstone, we have Gorm wanting to cast his debuffs, so adding more casting speed right there is never a bad idea, and it gives 30 MP, nothing too crazy. Makes him very, very weak to dark, though. Keep that in mind. We're not going to equip that. Some other great options we have here. Brooch of the 7 Butterflies, just because of the monstrous stat sticks that it would be giving Gorm, as well as regeneration and magic barrier, so we could take off fast barrier if we used the Brooch here. Sphere of the 4 Jewels. Fire, Ice, Earth, Thunder damage taken minus 10%, so that's all damage across those 4 elements, physical, magic, and special alike. Very, very good one, and it has very nice resistances on top of that, plus a nice HP stat. And I'm sure there are a ton of other accessories I didn't get to shout out that I should have, but we're just going to equip this Sphere of the 4 Jewels for that extra damage mitigation to those 4 elements and the stat sticks right there. That looks like a real nice tank build for me, so we're going to go ahead and hit confirm, which allows us to wrap up talking about the build, going into an actual stage to show Gorm off, and of course we'll show off some arcs that work very well on your tanks. Here we are in 6-9, Encroaching Dead. Y'all know it was coming. We're going to be showing off our Gorm tank build right after I go over some arc selections that will always work with your tanks. Starting with the one I have equipped, Ancient Weapon Lugan, Defense Mind plus 15%, damage from critical hits minus 50%, damage from bosses minus 15%, plus check the stats, a bunch of HP, and big fat numbers to your both defensive stats, and a good amount of MP considering Arks. So this is just kind of your textbook standard tank arc right here. Gonna work very, very well. I didn't shout out the AER from this, but definitely something that you can use to help if you get the arc. 70 to both defense and MND, and on boss wave, defense plus 10%. Remember, chance to auto guard. It's irrelevant on Gorm and or Ruto because they already have guard built into them. Kaldina the Great not only gives you the freaking best weapon in the game, arguably, but it can also be a very great arc to run on your defensive or tanks. When a treasure chest drops, restores all allies to HP. That'll be fine. That's nothing too crazy. But during battle, all allies max HP plus 10%. Works for me. And when close to death, greatly restore HP and activate barrier. Remember, this is going to be one of those effects. It doesn't stack on top of Gorm's already skill that he has that recovers HP when low, but it gives him that barrier, which is going to be nice, giving him some flinch resistance and extra damage that he can take, plus some really nice stats as well to HP, defense, and MND. Funny enough, Maiden's Lovely Banquet should be in the consideration here. While it requires a little more tailoring, you want to think a little more about what build you have on your tank and in your team before using this arc. It can be an extreme boon to your tank under the right circumstances. Especially if you have them as their secondary utility being healing, you're getting that healing magic casting speed plus 30% to further get to that insta-cast. But then here you go. If you have a female on the team that is also buffing the team and in effect buffing your tank here, think of Sarah and her team-wide offensive boosting, or Spirit Maiden Tyria giving her faint nil to the team, you will be getting this next effect on your tank. When buffed by support magic from other female units, become more easily targeted and gain defense plus 25%. That's just music to my ears when we're talking about a tank, an extra allure stack, and more defense for that physical damage mitigation. While other female units are alive, you also get that MP regen, which would be great, helping us get to max MP or the ability to cast whatever utility spells we have on our tank, and plus 10% healing magic power for each other female unit. So, of course, this is very contingent on bringing a female unit in your party, but we have plenty of top-tier female units. Like I mentioned, Sarah, Spirit Maiden Tyria, Tinkili. If you have X-Bet on the team, I'm sure you could make her work. But something that's can be very, very beneficial to a tank if you set things up correctly. Santa Girls, this is the LR arc that gave us Christmas Carol, the skill I shouted out in the skill building, but also can be very, very useful for Gorm and any other tank. While the first part isn't super crazy unless you're bringing an ice attacker, the next part, continuous vitality effect, so that's going to give that stat that boosts your amount of HP that you have. But then gives physical damage taken cut for each buff on the unit up to 30%. So if a unit has 10 buffs on them, they're getting that 30% damage, physical damage mitigation, which is very, very considerable, especially for Arena. And we know that Gorm is already getting a bunch of buffs. He's getting Fort, we gave him Protection, Magic Barrier, he's getting Vitality from this, he's got Christmas Carol counts as a buff. There's 5 right there. That's 15% physical damage. And I'm probably not even thinking about a bunch more that we're just starting into the battle with. So this 30% is actually very, very achievable. And so I did want to give Santa Girls a shout out for being a very nice defensive tank arc. Funny enough, I don't really think there are any URs that I want to give a shout out to. If anything, Sky Fortress Solaris is only useful for tanks because damage taken in the first 20 seconds of battle is minus 50%, right? That's unconditional damage, covers all of them, and minus 50% is very, very considerable. However, since it's on that timer and then the rest of the trait is just affecting, your thunder attackers, it's not the craziest. It's not my first recommendation, but something to give a shout out to. Just because it can be utilized if you're dealing with very quick battles in the first 20 seconds. I'm sure there are a ton of others that I'm not thinking about. You guys can drop them in the comments below, any other suggestions or strategies that you have. But for the sake of time, it's time we look at Gorm in the battle. So what are we going to pay attention to in this? You can see I brought the homie Ardeen because we do need a damage dealer to actually take care of the enemies. But I want you to pay attention to how much easier an Allure tank makes things if they're drawing the enemy attention away from your glass cannons if you build like me. So start the quest. The date has changed and we'll make a cut, come back. How rude of the game to interrupt my speech, but we're back on track. Let's go into the fight. I'm going to switch over to Ardeen, run to a corner, and we're going to see how those Allure stacks are working. And if the enemies go straight to Gorm, if any of them even pay attention to me. Looks like the turtle is coming after me, this dragon's coming after me, so it's not the perfect. It's not looking as good as I want it to, but here we can see all the enemies are pretty much just concerned with Gorm for the majority of the time. We are getting the occasional retargeting to Ardeen, but I would safely say, other than this annoying dragon, that all of them are pretty much just concerned with Gorm. I mean, take this little snapshot image. We're going to run up behind these guys, just do some S2s, and end this real quick. I don't really need to go further than that one example to show how the Allure is going to be helping, right? Gorm ain't going down anytime soon. We now have Ardeen even beefier than he usually is at 17,000 HP. There's a good example of them just crowding around Gorm, so we don't have to worry about them killing us. And the tank is doing his job here. This will be interesting here. I am going to use Giga Blazer, and they do cast spells, so Giga Lastoma will also be useful here. So he's actually, it looks like he is insta-casting, which is great. Giga Lastoma, let's queue it up. And they are all going after him, which is just fantastic. Fantastic. You guys have seen how annoying this stage can be, because these guys are just running all over the place, right? But if they all group up together, let's go ahead and count to 10. If they all group up on him, it makes it even easier and less of a headache to worry about. I mean, that makes this stage look like a joke. Not difficult at all because Gorm here can easily tank the hits, grab all the enemy's attention so they're all clumping together, and Ardeen just does the job. Any other DPS could easily just clean up shop in this type of scenario. Moving on to the next scenario I want to showcase, something I have talked about in the past but haven't in a while, and I think will be useful information for newer players getting into the game, especially as we approach the 3-year anniversary. Allure tanks have a very, very nice niche use that you can take advantage of to make some difficult endgame boss fights a lot easier and help your damage dealers deal a lot more damage. And that is by allowing your damage dealers to basically just sit behind a boss the entirety of the fight and take advantage of backstab damage. I was hoping I'd find it a little more smooth than that, but right, backstab and surprise attack collectively give you an 80% damage boost, physical damage boost with backstab. But since we're going to be using Ardeen, who's a physical damage dealer, he's getting an 80% damage boost, which is just monstrous when attacking the enemy from behind. So as long as you're able to get behind the boss and your unit doesn't continuously reposition themselves in front of the boss, you can use the ability of Gorm alluring the enemy to face forward to just let your DPS sit there and get all that extra damage for very, very high damage output, consistent caps, etc. to typically harder and tankier bosses. We're going to be showing this off in high speed mode against one of the end game bosses, Lambda, just to show you how effective this strategy can be. So all we need is Gorm. I'm pretty confident Gorm's going to be able to tank any attacks that Lambda throws at him, and we're going to switch to Ardeen, and I'm going to show you. We run right behind. You can see the positioning right here. Well, when I target him, that doesn't work too well. We're going to go ahead and use Council of 10. I'm going to be using a lot of endgame hacks right now, but the point is you can see Lambda is shooting he's paying all of his attention to Gorm right there. Ardeen's sitting very comfortably behind Lambda out of the enemy attack range. We're going to get all of our skill stocks here and then just take advantage of all that backstab damage. You see that we just are absolutely getting damage cap consistently. Go ahead and win Apple Pie, our boy. Keep getting that skill stock. We'll normal attack to get our MP back real quick. As soon as we get a couple MP charges, we're back to full, and we can just rinse and repeat this. Gorm, look at his health. He's tanking all of the hits. He's alluring all of the attacks. And it's literally as easy as this fight can get. We just rinse and repeat this process here. What used to be considered one of the hardest fights in the game is now reduced to nothing. Absolutely nothing. I think we're going to go for a record here. Why not? Just keep casting Winner's Apple Pie, get all of our skill stocks. I do have, what I did change, I didn't even talk about it. I made Gorm a lightning gauge spammer because that basically puts Lambda into a stun when he's hit by any type of magic lightning attacks, right? Either lightning magic or lightning moves, puts him into a stun state, stopping him from doing this weird countdown. I think this is Gorm's lightning gauge here. I'm just gonna pop it again, just in case we need to get some MP back, and that simple with Goddess Kiss. That simple with Goddess Kiss, and Lambda's dead. With Gorm being like as tanky as he is, I'm not really worried about this final assault. Remember, Gorm still has his ability to recover and then survive that lethal damage. So that's 2 layers of tankiness. The damage is absolutely a joke. And what used to be one of the most difficult things to endure, right, this onslaught of damage, with this 2-man setup, as you can see, it's just no problem at all. There we go, 744 it took us. I don't know if I've done it faster. Like I said, I was trying to get a little new account record. But let's see what we can do here. Beautiful. 1:15 effective seconds it took us to actually clear that stage. And a perfect showcase of why Allure tanks in boss battles can be so effective in enabling your offense. And then, of course, we all know how infamous Gorm is in Arena. You can see your boy Booda's rocking him on my team to do exactly the same stuff that basically he was doing over in PvE. You want a bunch of Allure stacks on him. You want a bunch of damage mitigation. Physical damage mitigation, I think, is a lot more prevalent in Arena than it is in PvE. You can see, what do I have? Gorm's purpose is to be a Blizzard spammer and just be extremely tanky. So when we're fighting the AI, if you can have your one offensive unit, as you can see, I have Demon Lord Rimuru, just be able to attack all the enemies at once, you're in a very, very good position. I'm kind of going overkill on the tanks here. We've got Ruto and Gorm, but we'll go ahead and go into a battle just to show you that my Rimuru doesn't really get bothered too much. Occasionally, the AI will not target one of my two tanks and go after Rimuru, which is fine, because eventually they will kind of stick to the tanks. As long as I can keep their magic under control by killing their CC mage, we'll have Gorm basically just spamming Blizzard the entire time, not dying, alluring all of the enemies, and it's just a great time. What do we got going on? I imagine his Gorm is going to be doing the same thing. So we're probably not going to have priority casting space. Remember, the defense you're fighting always has the priority in casting speed. Very, very important to note. So I think we're going to go out, try and take out his offense. Demon Lord Rimuru can be annoying if he gets off some S3s. So this Inferno, for the one time, kill everything in one shot. I think Mikasa has her invulnerability active. We definitely probably killed her technically. So we're going to go after Tyria and wait that out. So Tyria's dead. Gorm is guarding right now, which is just fine. Let's see if we can take her out. Are we missing her? Are we hitting her? I can't even tell. She definitely has her stuff active. So, but you can see, look at where Mikasa's positioned. Gorm and Ruto. That's immediately where she went. That's the goal. Leave my Rimuru alone over here and let him just spam skills, and it's a grand old time. We're going to take out Rimuru here because he's the only real offensive threat. While Mikasa, we're still waiting her invulnerability out. So Tyria, goodbye to you. Yep, go ahead, do a heal. It's fine. Waste everyone's time, and you're gone. So we're going to run over here, and I think Mikasa's buff should be gone by now, so we're going to Megiddo, and everyone is dead. That's just great. Rimuru, you are just a true gem. Look at hers. Look, she's not even going towards the main threat, so we can just wipe her out immediately. We'll do it again, and Rimuru's S1 is just the best thing I've ever used in Arena. But there you go. Shows the point that your tanks are there just to tank damage, not die, allure enemies away from your main attackers, and he's just a grand old time in Arena. And I think I have shown off everything that I wanted to in this video. Always a very nice long amount of footage for me to chop and edit, so I'm going to be getting to that. I hope you all enjoyed this video. All of my Booda builds are usually just about physical attackers, since that's kind of what rules the game. But my goodness, when we get a gem like Gorm or any other support type units, they can make a huge difference if you set them up right and use them basically to enable those physical damagers, make them more defensive, right? Let your physical damagers be the glass cannons that you want them to be, dealing damage cap every single hit. Because you have units like Gorm, your support Spirit Maiden Tyria, Sarah, allow them to be the defensive boons to your team, so that everything's just cohesive. You can focus in on your builds, and it's just a grand old time. Hope this video helped you. If you're kind of perplexed on what kinds of skills, what kind of thinking to go about with your tank build, since it's not as common knowledge, right? It's not as emphasized, since the role itself is a lot rarer, but I'm very, very happy with what we were able to showcase in this video. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, of course, as always. And that's all I got for you this time, guys. Like, subscribe, bell noties. If you're new, you know the YouTube drill by now. And with all that being said, y'all know what we say. Work hard, play hard. See you in the next video.